My BF's family scoffed at me in Spanish and deemed me quite dumb, until I replied in their language, and wiped every smirk away that night. Okay, gather round, because I have a story for you. A story about betrayal, about finding my voice, and about the night I made an entire family's smirks disappear. Pretty but dumb. That's what Sebastian, my boyfriend of 6 months, truly thought of me. He whispered it to his smirking family, thinking I was just a clueless American, smiling politely across his mother's fine china. But what he didn't know, I spoke fluent Spanish, and that night I collected every single one of their insults like tiny, venomous daggers, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's ammunition. Before Sebastian Alvarez, I actually prided myself on being a good judge of character, on seeing beneath the surface. But with him, I was willfully, embarrassingly blind. We met at Marlowe's, this cozy bookstore cafe near my grad campus. I'm Romy Adler, 26, buried in linguistics textbooks, working on my master's in communications. I'm usually way too busy for distractions. But then this voice, warm and accented, asked if he could share my table. I looked up and into the most captivating brown eyes I'd ever seen. He was tall, perfectly styled, with a smile that just melted my carefully constructed walls. Sebastian, he said, extending a hand that wore an expensive watch. Romy, I replied, feeling the firm grip. He saw my textbook. Communications, Westlake. I explained I was specializing in cross-cultural communications. His eyebrows shot up. Impressive, breaking down barriers between worlds. The way he said it, like he genuinely found me interesting, sent a flush of pleasure through me. Investment banking was his job, but literature was his passion, he said. Marquez Bolano Allende. He rattled off names like music. We talked for 2 hours that morning, my coffee long cold. Sebastian, I learned, was the son of Colombian immigrants who'd built a financial empire. Born in Bogota, raised here since he was 5. He moved between cultures with this effortless grace I absolutely envied, quoting poets 1 minute, debating American politics the next. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. By our 3rd date, I was head over heels. You're different, he told me one night, walking by the river, his fingers entwined with mine. Most American girls I date are so predictable. You have depth. I should have asked about those other predictable American girls. I should have noticed how he constantly drew lines between me and them. But I was too caught up in his compliments, too flattered. Sebastian was everything I thought I wanted. Handsome, intelligent, ambitious, with just enough edge to keep me fascinated. When he spoke Spanish on calls with his family, it sounded like music, intimate and rich. You should learn Spanish, he'd tease, running fingers through my blonde hair. Though maybe not. It's cute when you don't understand. I'd reply, I took some in high school, which wasn't exactly a lie. I just omitted the semester abroad in Barcelona, the advanced conversation classes, the near fluency I maintained. It never seemed important. He'd smile, mi amor, you're beautiful enough not to need it. I'd laugh, ignoring how that compliment felt backhanded. Sebastian had a way of wrapping criticism in charm, making me constantly question if I was just being too sensitive. You're so American sometimes, he'd say when I suggested splitting a check. I love how you don't care what people think about your clothes. Each comment delivered with such affection that I'd end up thanking him for the insult. There were other signs. The coldness that would come over him during phone calls with his family, always in Spanish, always ending with laughter I couldn't understand. The way he'd check my outfit before we met his friends, suggesting adjustments that always made me feel less like me. How he'd introduce me as my American girlfriend, like I was some exotic pet he'd acquired. My best friend, Zoe, noticed. We were roommates in college. Brutal honesty was our foundation. Are you sure about this guy? She asked one night, tucked into my sofa. He seems like he's playing a role. What do you mean? I asked, defensive. I've seen him with you, and I've seen him when he thinks no one's watching. It's like two different people. And the way he talks about his family like they're royalty, but he never wants you to meet them? It's weird, Romy. You don't know him like I do, I insisted. He's just private, different around family. She raised an eyebrow. And that doesn't worry you? Who someone is with their family usually tells you a lot. His family is important to him, I said. He just wants to make sure the timing is right. 6 months isn't the right timing? Zoe pressed. Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just don't want to see you get hurt. I brushed her off. What did Zoe know? She hadn't seen how he looked at me when we were alone. Felt the electricity. I was sure I knew him better than anyone. Then came the invitation. You should meet my family, he said one Sunday morning in my bed. Sunlight streaming in. Big dinner next weekend. My mom's dying to see the girl who stole my heart. My stomach fluttered with both excitement and nerves. Really? You've told them about me? Of course, he said, but something flashed in his eyes. Amusement? Worry. It disappeared too fast. They want to meet the American girl I can't stop talking about. I sat up, suddenly wide awake. Well, that's great. I'd love to meet them. They'll love you, he said, but his tone didn't quite match his words. Just be yourself. Well, maybe a slightly more conservative version of yourself. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. For the next few days, Sebastian made the dinner sound less like a casual gathering and more like a test. Just smile and be polite, he reminded me. My mother can be traditional, and my sister Camila is protective. Just follow my lead. 3 days out, I was in such a state of anxiety that I went shopping, discarding outfit after outfit as too casual, too revealing, too American. I settled on a conservative navy dress. I practiced basic Spanish phrases in the mirror, researched Colombian customs until my eyes burned. You're overthinking this, Zoe said. It's dinner, not a UN summit. His family is important to him, I insisted. I want them to like me. Romy, are you sure you know this guy? I mean, really know him? She asked. I laughed off her concern. Of course I do. We've been together 6 months. Time doesn't equal transparency, she said, but I was already changing the subject. Saturday evening. Perfect weather, jasmine in the air. Sebastian picked me up in a sleek black Audi, whistling when he saw me. You look beautiful, he said, kissing my cheek. Very appropriate. The word landed awkwardly, but I smiled. Thank you. I want to make a good impression. The drive took us through increasingly affluent neighborhoods. The Alvarez home was a huge stucco house in the hills, manicured gardens, a statement of success. My mouth went dry. Ready. Sebastian squeezed my hand. It felt like a warning, not comfort. His mother emerged, elegant in silk, hair perfect. Bienvenida, Romy, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume. We've heard so much about you. Behind her, his father, tall, stern, with Sebastian's eyes but none of his warmth, and Camila, stunning, sharp cheekbones, cool appraisal that made me instantly inadequate. It's lovely to meet you all, I said, praying my voice didn't crack. Inside, the house was overwhelming. Family photos, religious icons, valuable art. Immaculate. As Sebastian showed me around, I noticed subtle glances between him and Camila, his mother's smile stiffening when I admired a painting, laughter erupting just after I spoke. Something was off. I just couldn't pinpoint it. The dining room was intimidating. A long mahogany table set with delicate china, crystal, fresh flowers. A maid quietly placed final touches. Sit here next to Sebastian, his mother directed, putting me across from Camila. I smoothed my dress and sat, my smile fixed. From the moment we sat, Sebastian seamlessly switched to Spanish. I kept my expression neutral, pretending to understand nothing. Mama, el vino que trajimos, Sebastian said, handing her a bottle. She examined the label, a small shrug. Americano, she said, a note of disappointment in her voice. I pretended not to notice. Gracias por la invitation, I said carefully, one of my practice phrases. There was a beat of silence, then a ripple of suppressed laughter. His mother recovered first. De nada, she replied, exchanging a glance with Camila. Our home is your home. The maid brought soup. It smelled amazing. La sopa está deliciosa, I complimented, thinking my Spanish sounded decent. Ella Paris barata para Instagram, Camila murmured to Sebastian, not even lowering her voice. She looks like a cheap Instagram girl. My cheeks burned, but I kept my spoon moving, pretending I hadn't understood. Sebastian laughed. Not my Sebastian's laugh, but something harder, meaner. Linda pero tonta, his mother snorted delicately. Pretty but dumb. I gripped my napkin under the table, twisting the fabric until my knuckles turned white. The fish course arrived. I complimented it too, determined to be the perfect guest, the knot in my stomach tightening. I'd been fluent in Spanish since my semester in Barcelona, kept it up with conversation groups and online classes. It was a secret skill, a window into another world. I'd never told Sebastian. It had never seemed important. Until now. As the meal progressed, I started counting. My laugh is annoying. My clothes are like an American waitress. My conversation has no depth. Each barb landed like a tiny, stinging dart. I kept smiling, eating tiny bites, nodding as if I understood nothing. She's very blonde, isn't she? Sebastian's father said in English, addressing his son, but looking directly at me. Dad likes to tease, Sebastian told me, patting my hand, then in Spanish to his father, No es tan boba, pa. She's not that stupid, Dad. More laughter. I took a sip of wine, wondering if they could see my hand trembling. The worst moment came when his father asked in Spanish if I was the one. Sebastian chuckled and shook his head. Es una distracción. Otra cueva colombiana. She's a distraction. Another Colombian cave, referring to a casual hookup spot / easy target. My stomach turned, but I didn't react. I made polite conversation with Camila, who responded curtly, glaring at my wine glass. I was on my second. Apparently, that was one too many for proper company. So, Romy, Sebastian's mother said in English as dessert arrived, a delicate flan with espresso. Sebastian tells us you're in graduate school. Yes, I said, grateful for English. I'm getting my master's in communications. How practical, she replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. And how did you two meet? Sebastian is usually so selective. I recited the bookstore story, smiling, aware that Sebastian was murmuring something in Spanish to Camila that made her smirk. Such a romantic, his mother said when I finished. Don't you think, honey? She directed this at Sebastian's father, who merely grunted. Romy doesn't need romance, Sebastian said, squeezing my shoulder. She's very, what's the word? Accommodating. The double meaning wasn't lost on his family, who exchanged knowing looks. I smiled wider than ever, because now I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let them see it coming. The dinner continued. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, every sense focused on their conversation. You grew up in Vermont, his father asked in English. Yes, Burlington. My father is a professor of environmental science there. Ah, academia, he said, slight smile. Very idealistic. Papa fue profesor antes de entrar en finanzas, Sebastian added. Dad was a professor before he went into finance. I nodded as if this was new. His father's expression softened slightly when discussing his past, the first genuine emotion I'd seen. Did you enjoy teaching? I asked him directly. Very much, he replied, surprised by my interest. But academia doesn't pay for houses like this. He gestured with his wine glass. It's not always about money, I said. Easy to say when you have plenty. The family dynamic was becoming clearer. His father, the practical one. His mother, the guardian of tradition. Camila, the rebel, but within acceptable boundaries. And Sebastian. I was beginning to wonder if I knew him at all. "Would you like more wine, Romy?" his mother asked, eyeing my nearly empty glass. "No, thank you," I replied, noticing she relaxed slightly at my refusal. "The food is so delicious. I want to enjoy it fully." "Sei frena, una americana," she said to her husband. She stops herself for an American. Surprising for an American. I pretended to be fascinated by my plate. Sebastian's hand found my knee under the table, squeezing. I resisted the urge to push it away. "Romy is studying cross-cultural communication," he told his family in English. "She's very interested in how people from different backgrounds interact." "Is that so?" his father asked, his interest finally genuine. "And what have you learned?" I looked directly at him. "That people often say one thing to your face and another behind your back, especially when they think you can't understand them." A moment of silence. Sebastian's hand tightened on my knee. "How very insightful," his mother finally said, her smile tight. "Sebastian, did you tell Romy about the time you spent in New York?" The subject changed smoothly. The tension passed, but I had seen the flash of unease in their eyes. They were wondering if I'd meant something. As dessert was served, I studied Sebastian with new eyes. The way he deferred to his father, monitored his mother, the competitive edge with Camila. Here, in his family home, he wasn't the charming man I knew. He was performing, just as he had been with me. "So, Romy," his mother asked, as I took a delicate bite of flan, "how long have you two been seeing each other?" 6 months, I replied. Sebastian tensed. "Too long," his mother smiled thinly. "And is it serious?" "Mama, pour favor," Sebastian said quietly. "It's a simple question," she replied in English. "A mother likes to know these things." I placed my spoon down carefully. "I think that's something Sebastian and I are still figuring out," I said diplomatically. "Smart girl," his father nodded. "No need to rush these things, especially when she's not the right one." I took a sip of water, letting the coolness soothe my throat, which felt tight with unshed tears. Not of sadness, but of pure rage. As the dinner wound down, Sebastian seemed to relax, clearly thinking we'd made it through. He had no idea what was coming. Camila leaned forward. "How long did you say you've been with my brother?" 6 months, I replied. "Demasiado tiempo," she muttered to Sebastian. "Too long." I catalogued every cruel comment, every smug grin Sebastian shared. I wasn't just being mocked. I was being paraded as a joke, a temporary amusement until he returned to the life they thought he deserved. Between dessert and coffee, Sebastian leaned in, his breath warm on my ear. "You doing okay?" he whispered, like a snake with syrup in its voice. I nodded, meeting his eyes. "This has been eye-opening." He smiled, clearly misinterpreting my meaning. His hand squeezed my knee, a possessive gesture that now made my skin crawl. My mind drifted to a conversation with Zoe months ago. We were in a bookstore. "So, things are going well with Mr. Perfect?" she asked. "Really well," I said. "He's taking me to that new rooftop restaurant." "Huh," she replied. "Can I ask you something without you getting defensive?" That's never a good start to a question. "He talks down to you, Romy," she said, gentle but firm. "You laugh it off, but he does it a lot." I felt my defenses rise. "He's just teasing. It's how we are." "No," she insisted. "It's how he is with you. There's a difference. Just pay attention to how he makes you feel. If you feel smaller instead of bigger, that's not love." Another memory. A party at his friend Miguel's. Sebastian, 3 drinks in, louder than usual, arms slung around me. "My American trophy," he'd announced, kissing my temple. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, thinking he was playful. Now I understood. I had never been a partner. I'd been a novelty, an exotic diversion. Something to show off and then discard. I watched his parents. His mother saw me as beneath them. His father, almost amused like I was entertainment. When his mother asked if I'd traveled, I deliberately dumbed down my response. Just Florida for spring break, I said, though I'd backpacked Europe for 6 months. Americanos, his father muttered in Spanish to Camila. Su idea de cultura es Disney World. Americans. Their idea of culture is Disney World. I nodded eagerly as if agreeing. Their smugness was palpable. Feeding it made my planned revelation even more satisfying. The maid brought coffee. I watched Sebastian's mother direct her in rapid Spanish imperious. The young woman, not much older than me, kept her eyes down. I wondered how many times she'd been mocked in the same room. Cream or sugar? Sebastian's mother asked me in English. Just black. Thank you. Negra como su alma, Camila murmured. Black like her soul. Sebastian snorted, disguised as a cough. I took a careful sip of the bitter coffee, savoring the burn. Sebastian told a joke in Spanish about grass and white bread that made them erupt in laughter. I smiled blankly, as if I hadn't heard the punchline that compared American women to bread. Pale, soft, no flavor. The evening was winding down. I hope you stay sweet, Romy, his mother said, patting my hand. Don't try too hard. It's unbecoming. The condescension was unmistakable. I just nodded, allowing a flicker of confusion to cross my face. As the maid cleared dessert plates, I caught Sebastian's father's eye. Gracias por la cena, I said softly, making sure my pronunciation was perfect. Thank you for the dinner. He froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Sebastian looked at me sharply, eyes narrowing. Camila's mouth opened slightly. I just smiled, the same placid smile I'd worn all evening. But inside something shifted. The balance of power was tilting. The storm was gathering, and I was ready to let it break. As Sebastian's father set down his cup with a sharp clink, the silence in the room was electric. His mother's smile faltered. Camila sat straighter. Perdón. Sebastian's father said, his voice careful. I maintained my innocent expression. I was just thanking you for dinner, I replied in English, blinking as if confused. Sebastian laughed, a nervous sound I'd never heard. She's picked up a few phrases from me, he explained to his family in Spanish. Cute, right? His mother nodded, relief crossing her face. Yes, very quaint. But his father was still watching me, suspicion lingering. I met his eyes briefly before looking away, as if intimidated. The conversation resumed, but with a new undercurrent of caution. Sebastian kept glancing at me, his confidence wavering. Tell Romy about the beach house in Cartagena, his mother suggested, trying to steer to safer waters. Sebastian described their family vacation home, but I noticed he chose his words carefully now, speaking more English than Spanish. It sounds beautiful, I said when he finished. I'd love to see Colombia someday. Oh, his mother replied. Sebastian hasn't mentioned taking you. The barb was delivered with a smile, but I felt it. No, I agreed. He hasn't. Camila, sensing my changed mood, tried to reclaim control. Probably because Americans don't appreciate the real Colombia, she said in Spanish to her brother. They want resorts and tourist traps. I studied my coffee cup, letting the insult land without reaction. The counter on my mental tally clicked higher. Sebastian's father leaned forward. What do you hope to do with your communications degree, Romy? He asked in English, his tone suggesting he found the field trivial. I'm specializing in cross-cultural communications, I replied. There's so much misunderstanding that happens between people who speak different languages. For a moment, I thought I'd given too much away. Sebastian's expression flickered, but then he relaxed, apparently deciding I was speaking generally. Language barriers can be challenging, his mother agreed, with a pointed look at her son. Sometimes they're convenient, I said mildly. People often say things they wouldn't if they thought everyone understood. The table went quiet again. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the tension. Sebastian cleared his throat. Maybe we should go soon, he suggested. Romy has an early class tomorrow. I didn't, but I nodded. It's been such an interesting evening. As we prepared to leave, Sebastian's mother pulled him aside, whispering furiously in Spanish. I caught fragments. Not serious, temporary. His father approached me while Sebastian was distracted. You've been quiet tonight, he observed. I've been listening, I replied. Something in my tone made him study me more carefully. Yes, he said slowly. I imagine you have. Sebastian returned, slipping his arm around my waist. Ready, Mama? The endearment that once made my heart flutter now turned my stomach. I nodded, saying my goodbyes with perfect politeness. As we walked to the car, Sebastian seemed relieved. That went well, he said, squeezing my shoulder. They liked you. I didn't answer immediately, watching the house recede in the side mirror. The perfect facade, both his and mine, was about to shatter. Did they? I finally asked. I got a different impression. Sebastian frowned. What do you mean? I looked out the window. Just that people aren't always what they seem, I said quietly. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. You're overthinking, Romy. Everything's fine. I nodded, letting him believe that for now. The confrontation could wait until we weren't in a moving vehicle. But it was coming. The storm clouds had gathered, dark and heavy with 6 months of lies and mockery, and I was finally ready to let the rain fall. The ride back to my apartment was tense. Sebastian kept glancing at me, his usual confidence replaced by something I'd never seen in him before. Uncertainty. You're quiet, he said, turning down the radio. Did something happen? I watched the street lights flash by. 6 months of lies. 6 months of thinking I was the lucky one. I was just thinking about your family, I said carefully. They loved you, he insisted, reaching for my hand. I let him take it, though his touch now felt foreign. My mother said you were charming. Did she? I asked. In English or Spanish? He laughed, but it sounded forced. What does that matter? Just curious. We rode in silence for another mile before he tried again. Look, I know my family can be a bit intense, but they mean well. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The anger I'd been suppressing all evening was building, a pressure behind my ribs that threatened to explode. I focused on my breathing, on the plan taking shape in my mind. Want to come up? I asked when he pulled up to my building. Relief washed over his face. Sure, I'd like that. My apartment was small but cozy, filled with books, photos, treasures from my travels. Sebastian had always treated it like a quaint curiosity, so different from his sleek downtown condo. I put water on to boil while Sebastian made himself comfortable on my sofa, scrolling through his phone. A text chimed. He smiled. Your sister? I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. Yeah, he replied, typing a response. She wants to know if you survived the Inquisition. What are you telling her? That you were perfect, he said, setting his phone down. The perfect American girlfriend. I walked over slowly, sitting on the coffee table directly across from him. Our knees almost touched. Can I ask you something, Sebastian? He leaned forward, taking my hands. Of course, mamita. Anything. What does Linda Pero Tanta mean? The color drained from his face. His hands went slack in mine. What about Puta Barata Para Instagram? I asked. I'm particularly interested in that one. Sebastian's eyes widened. Romy. Or how about Es una distraction? Otra cueva colombiana. I continued. That was my personal favorite. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I could hear the water beginning to boil, the clock ticking, the blood rushing in my ears. Wait, you speak Spanish? Sebastian finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. I withdrew my hands from his. Oh, fluently, I said. Since I was 16. It's really helped tonight. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me I was just a temporary amusement? I countered, remaining seated. Why didn't you tell me your family would mock and humiliate me at dinner? It wasn't like that, he started, but I cut him off. It was exactly like that, I said, my voice steady despite the rage turning inside me. You brought me there to be laughed at, to prove something to your family, that you could bag the dumb blonde American girl. Romy, please. I sat there for 3 hours, I continued, standing now. 3 hours of listening to you and your family tear me apart in a language you thought I couldn't understand. Your sister called me cheap. Your mother said I wasn't good enough for you. And you. My voice broke slightly. You said I was just filling time. Sebastian's face had gone from pale to flushed. It was just family teasing, he said weakly. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything, I replied. It showed me exactly who you are when you think I can't understand you. He took a step toward me. Look, I'm sorry if some things got lost in translation. Nothing got lost, I interrupted. Everything was crystal clear. You've been playing me for 6 months. That's not true, he protested. I care about you. You care about having a blonde American trophy to parade around, I said. Someone who won't challenge you or see through your act. That's not fair. Fair. I laughed bitterly. Was it fair to listen to your sister call me a cheap Instagram girl? Was it fair when you agreed that I was pretty but dumb? Was any of tonight fair, Sebastian? He had the decency to look ashamed. My family is complicated, he said. You don't understand the pressure. I understand perfectly, I cut in. I understand that you're a coward who can't stand up to his family. I understand that you've been living a double life. The charming boyfriend with me, and the sneering son with them. It's not that simple, he argued, desperation creeping into his voice. Yes, tonight was bad, but my feelings for you are real. Which feelings? I asked. The ones you express in English to my face, or the ones you share in Spanish behind my back? Sebastian sank back onto the sofa, head in his hands. I've made a terrible mistake, he said. I never thought you'd understand. That's the problem, isn't it? I said quietly. You never thought I'd understand. You never thought I had depth or intelligence or the capacity to see through you. That's not true, he insisted, looking up at me with pleading eyes. Let me explain. I think you've explained enough, I said, walking to the door and opening it. We're done, Sebastian. Lose my number. You're fluent in lies, but I don't translate those anymore. He stood slowly, disbelief written across his face. You're breaking up with me? Just like that. Just like that, I confirmed. Though, I'd say you broke us long before tonight. Romy, please, he begged. We can fix this. Let me talk to my family. There's nothing to fix, I said firmly. Tonight wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation. Don't do this, he said, moving toward the door but not leaving. Let's talk tomorrow when we're both calmer. Goodbye, Sebastian, I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. Wishing him well in the language he never thought I'd master was my final act of defiance. He stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. Then, without another word, he walked out. I closed the door behind him, leaning against it as my legs threatened to give way. The kettle in the kitchen was whistling furiously. Like me, it had reached its boiling point. Defiance. He stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. Then, without another word, he walked out. I closed the door behind him, leaning against it as my legs threatened to give way. The kettle in the kitchen was whistling furiously. Like me, it had reached its boiling point. Sebastian blew up my phone for days. Texts, voice notes, even flowers at my door with apology cards I never read. I ignored them all, watching as his messages evolved from apologetic to angry to pleading. You're overreacting. One text read, it was just family banter. Another, I miss you. Please call me. And finally, you owe me a chance to explain. I owed him nothing. I blocked his number a week after the dinner. But I wasn't just angry. I was disappointed in him, yes, but also in myself. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so willfully blind? The Monday after blocking him, I met Zoe. She was already waiting, 2 lattes on the table. You look like hell, she said bluntly. Thanks, I replied, managing a small smile. I feel worse. I told her everything. The dinner, the insults, the confrontation. She listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wider with each detail. When I finished, she didn't say, I told you so. She just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so proud of you, she said. That took guts. It took too long, I admitted. I should have seen it sooner. We all have blind spots when it comes to love, she said. The important thing is you saw the truth eventually and had the strength to walk away. We sat in companionable silence. A memory surfaced. My high school Spanish teacher, Señorita Ortega. Language is power, she told us. When you learn to speak someone else's tongue, you gain access to their world. Never let anyone silence you. I'd carried those words with me, but with Sebastian, I'd allowed myself to be silenced. I played small to make him feel big. What now? Zoe asked, interrupting my thoughts. Now I pick up the pieces, I said, and make sure I never ignore red flags again. That night, I journaled everything. Not to wallow, but to remember. To create a record of the signs I'd missed, the compromises I'd made, the times I'd felt diminished but rationalized away. Not to punish myself, but to ensure I never lowered my standards again. 3 days later, a direct message appeared on my Instagram from Camila, Sebastian's sister. I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. I didn't know you understood, it read. I'm sorry for laughing. What we did was cruel. I stared at the message. In the end, I closed the app. Her apology wasn't for me. It was to ease her conscience. I didn't know her absolution. The following weekend, organizing photos on my laptop, I found a video of Sebastian. Months ago at a restaurant, mimicking a server with a thick Eastern European accent, exaggerating it for laughs. I hadn't noticed then how cruel the imitation was, how the humor relied entirely on mockery. Now it made me sick. I deleted it, along with every picture of Sebastian on my phone and social media. It felt like cleaning house, removing a toxin. The next week, I forced myself to go out. Not to a bar, not to meet someone. I wasn't ready for that, but to a salsa bar downtown offering lessons. I went alone, ignoring the flutter of anxiety. For 2 hours I danced. I laughed when I stumbled, accepted guidance, felt the music move through me like a cleansing wave. I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just being. As I walked home, I realized I was reconnecting with the version of myself that existed before Sebastian. The woman who didn't apologize for taking up space, who found joy in learning, who didn't need anyone's approval. 2 weeks after the dinner from hell, an email arrived. A bilingual copywriting agency, offering me a position. Spanish fluency required. The job I'd applied for months ago, almost forgotten. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the offer. Full circle, I whispered, a smile spreading. That night I called my parents. They were thrilled. I'm proud of you, kiddo, my father said. Not just for the job. Zoe told us what happened with that guy. I groaned. She shouldn't have. She was worried about you, my mother said. And she wanted us to know how strong you were being. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I feel foolish. Recognizing when someone isn't treating you right and walking away. That takes strength, my father said. A lot of people never get there. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony. I wasn't broken, just bruised. And sometimes, bruises remind you of the fights worth walking away from. A month later, I heard through mutual friends that Sebastian had moved back to Colombia. His father had connections at a prestigious financial firm in Bogota. A position had suddenly become available. I felt nothing at the news, just relief. Life settled into a new rhythm. My job at the copywriting agency, using my Spanish daily. On weekends, I started teaching beginner Spanish classes at a community center. Why do you want to learn Spanish? I asked my students. My mom says it will help me get a job, one replied. I want to understand Bad Bunny songs, another laughed. I want to travel the world and talk to everyone, said a shy girl in the back, eyes bright. That was the answer that resonated. Language as connection, as a door to new experiences. I made it my mission to teach them not just grammar, but the confidence my teacher had given me. To speak up, make mistakes, find their voice in another language. 3 months after the disastrous dinner, I wrote an anonymous piece. Language and love. What I learned when my boyfriend didn't know I understood his insults. Submitted it to an online publication. It went viral on Medium. Comments poured in. People sharing similar stories. Of partners who belittled them. Of in-laws who thought cultural differences gave them license to be cruel. Of finally standing up for themselves. Your story made me realize I deserve better, one comment read. I left him yesterday. I hadn't written it for validation or revenge. I'd written it to process, to transform it from something that happened to me into something I could control. But knowing it had helped others, that made the pain worthwhile. To celebrate, Zoe and I planned a trip to Costa Rica, a place I'd always wanted to visit, but Sebastian had insisted we save for Colombia instead. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 10 days, we hiked rainforests, lounged on beaches, explored markets. I negotiated everything in Spanish, haggling with vendors, chatting with guides, ordering food in tiny local restaurants far from tourist paths. It felt like a quiet reclaiming of something that had been tainted. On our last night at a beach cafe, locals gathered to watch the sunset. The air was heavy with salt and promise. The sky, a riot of pink and orange. I was sipping a cold beer when a man approached. Tall, sun-streaked hair, an easy smile. Mind if I join you? He asked, English with a slight accent. I'm Mateo. I own this place. Zoe kicked me under the table, eyes wide with encouragement. I nodded. We talked as the sky darkened. He was Costa Rican, but had spent years in Australia. Intelligent, funny, and most importantly, he listened. Really listened without interrupting or one-upping or dismissing. What brings you to Costa Rica? He asked. A celebration, I replied. New job, new chapter. And what was the old chapter? I hesitated, then chose honesty. A relationship that wasn't what I thought it was. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Those can be the hardest to leave. But the most necessary, I added. As the night progressed, Zoe made an excuse about being tired, shooting me a not-so-subtle thumbs-up as she left. Mateo and I continued talking, moving from casual to deeper topics. His dreams of expanding his cafe into a cultural center. My passion for using language to connect people. Do you speak Spanish? He asked, switching seamlessly. Fluently, I replied in kind. That's refreshing, he said. Most tourists don't bother. I believe in meeting people where they are, I told him. Language is the first step. He smiled. Something warm unfurled in my chest. Not the desperate, consuming attraction I'd felt with Sebastian, but something quieter, more substantial. Can I ask you something personal? I said as he walked me back to my hotel later. Of course. Do you ever make fun of your date in a language she might not understand? He laughed, genuine and warm. Only if I want to get slapped. Why would anyone do that? You'd be surprised, I said softly. He stopped walking, turning to face me. Someone did that to you? I nodded. And you understood every word. He whistled low. I bet that didn't end well for them. It ended exactly as it should have, I replied. We reached my hotel. Mateo wrote his number on a napkin from his cafe. If you're ever back in Costa Rica, he said, handing it to me, or if you just want to practice your Spanish. I took it, our fingers brushing. "Thank you for a lovely evening." "Thank you for sharing your story," he replied. "Not everyone has the courage to walk away from something that diminishes them." I watched him leave, the napkin clutched in my hand. I didn't know if Mateo would be something. It was too soon, and we lived in different countries, and I was still healing. But I did know this. I'd never again pretend not to hear. I'd never again make myself small to make someone else feel big. I'd never again mistake cruelty for charm. Back in my room, I stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean. I thought about how far I'd come since that dinner. Not just geographically, but emotionally. I'd reclaimed my voice, my confidence, my sense of self. Because now I wasn't just fluent in Spanish. I was fluent in myself, my worth, my boundaries, my truth. And that was a language no one could ever take from me again. The morning of our departure, waiting for the shuttle, I received a text from Mateo. "Safe travels. The cafe will be here when you're ready to return. Thank you for listening." Because in the end, that's what we all want. To be heard, to be understood, to be valued for exactly who we are. Not despite our differences, but because of them. Not as temporary amusements, but as equal partners in the complex, beautiful dance of human connection. I boarded the plane with Zoe, ready to return home. Not to the place I'd been, but to the woman I'd become. Strong, certain, fluent in the language of self-respect. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't translating myself for anyone.